let's get into today's topics. We're going to start with inflation. I'm not even going to comment until I read you the nonsense that's going on. So first, we have a Wall Street Journal article that says the White House more than doubles its inflation forecast in their new update. The administration expects consumer prices to rise 4.8% in the fourth quarter from a year earlier. It lists projections for growth this year. And explicitly, word for word, the Wall Street article, I'm just going to read you the first 3 paragraphs or so. The first paragraph says, the White House more than doubled its forecast for annual inflation in new projections released Friday, as supply chain disruptions stemming from the COVID-19 pandemic continue to put forward pressure on prices. Next, says, the Office of Management and Budget said it expected consumer prices would rise 4.8% in the fourth quarter from a year earlier, up sharply from the 2% rise that the Biden administration forecast in May. So time out for a second. They said 2% in May. Now they're saying that it's going to rise 4.8%. Officials see those price pressures quickly abating next year, with the consumer price index rising 2.5% in the fourth quarter of 2022, more than the 2.1% they expected in May, reaching 2.3% in 2023. So pause for a second. 2% rise was expected in May for the fourth quarter. Now we're going to 4.8%, more than double what they were expecting. And then now we are also saying that in 2022, a year from the fourth quarter of this year, we are going to have 2.5%. So a year later, it's still going to be higher than what their expectation in May was for Q4 of 2021. Let's continue. Next, the updated projections are consistent with other independent forecasts, including the Federal Reserve, and reflect the administration's view that price pressures, while higher than expected earlier this year, are likely to fade over time, administration officials said Friday. Wait a second. They're now saying, oh, well, we agree with everybody else, and this is going to fade over time. Interesting. Next is a quote that says, we think this trajectory is very consistent with the inflation outlook we've been discussing pretty much since we got here. Time out, time out, time out. We are not going to get gaslit by these people. We think this trajectory is very much consistent with the inflation outlook we've been discussing pretty much since we got here. What are you talking about? Your expectation for Q4 in 2021 was 2%, and now you're saying it's 4.8%. It's more than double what you said it was going to be. What do you mean it's very consistent with the inflation outlook? You were off by literally 2.8%. That's not consistent. You can't just say, oh, this is consistent. We always thought this was going to happen, and then more than double your forecast. That's not how it works. You were wrong. Inflation is way higher than you originally thought. Be accountable and say that. Don't tell us that this is consistent with what we've been saying. No, it's not. You just increased it by more than 2x. So, because I won't let them gaslight us, and because the internet never forgets, I went back and I personally, the Best Business Show research team, they're amazing. Joe and John are great heads. I took it into my own hands today. I was not relying on anybody else. I went on the Google machine and I went back and I found just all the way back to July, not even that long ago, July 19th of this year, the remarks from President Biden on the economy. This is from the White House website. This is on the White House website. The first quote. Now, I want to be clear. My administration understands that if we were ever to experience unchecked inflation over the long term, that would pose real challenges to our economy. So while we're confident that isn't what we are seeing today, we're going to remain vigilant about any response that is needed. Rational, fair. Next quote. If we make a prudent multi-year investments in better roads, bridges, transit systems, and high-speed internet, and a modern, resilient electric grid, these steps will enhance our productivity, raising wages without raising prices. That won't increase inflation. It will take the pressure off of inflation and give a boost to our workforce, which leads to lower prices in the years ahead. Time out. Time out. 4 weeks ago, you were telling us that we were going to have lower prices in the years ahead. Now you're telling us that in Q4 of 2022, it's going to be 2.5% inflation, which is the rate of change from when you're telling us is 4.8% today. That's like compound growth. Today's prices are going to be 4.8% higher than they were in Q4 last year in 2020. And then they're going to be 2.5 times higher, or 2.5% higher in Q4 of 2022. The data that they are telling us and that now the White House is projecting goes directly in contrast with exactly what the president was claiming on July 19th of this year. And then on top of it, they are trying to gaslight us and tell us that they've always said that this is consistent with their belief. But you know what? That wasn't good enough. I went all the way back to May. Again, I personally went and looked at it. The best business show research team, the best. But I had to go do it today. And then I went and I found this, which is a CNN article. And this is just a screenshot. This isn't me interpreting it any way other than what they wrote. Biden official, no sign of long-term inflation. The White House is pushing back on these inflation jitters. Remember, they said 2% in Q4 of this year. Now they're saying 4.8%. But back then in May, they were saying is pushing back on these inflation jitters. Quote, we expect temporary imbalances between supply and demand, whether it is fewer rental cars available at first or fewer airline flights as airlines move back to their regular schedules. A White House official told CNN Business on Tuesday, these are signs of recovery. Although the Biden official acknowledged specific supply chain bottlenecks will take time to sort out, the official added, quote, we do not see signs of persistent dislocation or long-term inflation. Our team closely monitors inflationary pressures, but inflation is first and foremost under the purview of the Federal Reserve, the official told CNN Business. So here is what I don't understand. How can you in May say that this is simply signs of recovery, that this is actually good that this is happening, that we do not see signs of persistent dislocation or long-term inflation? And then in July, you come back and you say things like, if we make a prudent multi-year investment, it will bring down prices in the years ahead. So obviously you are concerned. But to then in August tell us and gaslight us that this has been consistent with your view is outrageous. But this is what happens. Nobody calls these people out on what they are saying or doing. If in May you weren't worried, but now you have more than doubled your expectation of inflation in Q4 of this year, are we worried now? Or has this always been consistent with your view? It's probably more the former than the latter. On top of that, if we still have 2.5% inflation, which is 25% more than the Federal Reserve's target of 2% in Q4 of 2022, does that qualify as long-term higher inflation? How do we define long-term? Well, that would have been 2.5 years after the recession ended. Remember, the recession last year ended in April of 2020. So in Q4 of 2022, we'll have been 2.5 years later, and we'll still have 25% higher inflation than the Federal Reserve's target. Is that not long-term? Do we have to have inflation higher than the Federal Reserve's target for a decade? Does that qualify as long-term? The thing is that what we are watching is we are watching the manipulation of words, we're watching the leveraging of vernacular, and we are watching the gaslighting of the American people because the economics of what is occurring does not match with a theory of what is supposed to happen based on their understanding. You cannot manipulate interest rates down to zero and artificially keep them depressed. And then at the same time also create trillions of dollars and stuff it into every corner of the economy and expect that inflation won't be a problem. We know that inflation is a problem. It's over 5% in the CPI terms. It's over 4% in core inflation. These are the highest levels in either 13 years for CPI or 30 years for core inflation. How can you not be worried? How can you say that it's not a problem? On top of that, if you are forced to increase your expectations by more than double to go from 2% to 4.8%, how can you say that it's consistent with what you've always thought? The numbers, it is impossible for you to say this was consistent. You just more than doubled what your forecast is. So obviously something is different. And again, I don't blame these people. I don't blame the organizations or the institutions. This stuff is hard. But I think the better approach is not to say, oh, we've always thought this, or we've always been consistent here. Instead, the better approach is to simply say, this is a complex economic machine. There's a lot of inputs and there's a lot of outputs. We are doing the best we can with the information that we have at any time. We have a lot of smart people. We look at a lot of data and we do our best. We reserve the right to change our mind in the future. And because we were presented with more information, we've changed our mind. That is a sign of intellectual capabilities and open-mindedness rather than sticking to a rigid thought process or theory in which we are willing to go down with the ship. People would be much more receptive to that story. They would understand. They would say, listen, I personally can't do any better. I don't think I or my brothers could do any better than they are. But what I do think is the problem, and the reason why people are losing trust with these institutions and with these individuals, is the fact that they continue to say things like, it is consistent with what we've always thought. It's not. It's very provably not consistent. And so instead of living in a world where politicians continue to just say things and everyone whitewashes history or simply says, of course that's what they've always thought. With the internet, with social media and young people, they now know we can check, we can verify the information. And what we find is that this is not consistent. And the more that they claim it is, the less and less we trust them, the less and less we believe what they're going to say in the future. And so ultimately, the secret to these folks establishing trust and keeping the ear of the American people is they have to remain accountable, they have to remain transparent, and they simply have to tell the truth. Just explain to everyone, this is hard. It is a complex economic machine, and we are going to get it wrong. Actually, we're going to get it wrong more than we're going to get it right. It's kind of like predicting the weather. The weather folks, nobody holds them accountable when they're wrong about predicting the weather because it's really, really difficult. On top of that, we understand that the inputs and information will change. And we understand that you can't point to one thing. It's not just monetary policy, fiscal policy, or supply chains. It's everything being analyzed in totality. Simply tell us the data changed, so we changed our mind. Do not gaslight us and tell us that you've always believed this, that it's consistent. Hey guys, bang, bang. Thanks so much for watching the Best Business Show today. And don't forget to check out our partner, SoFi. They make all this possible. They're a super app that lets you save, spend, borrow, earn, and invest all from one single platform. And if you go there today and you sign up for a SoFi Invest account, you can get between $5 and $1,000 for free from SoFi. Not everyone's obviously gonna get $1,000, but everyone gets something. Don't say that I never did anything for you. Go check them out at SoFi.com/pomp, download the app, and go ahead and open an account. SoFi.com/pomp, and make sure you come back and watch more of the Best Business Show. We're gonna build the biggest business show in the world, and we need your help.